Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Shelly, the owner and creator of the Vintage Hen and Chick. And in today's video, we're going to be doing 3 simple and fun thrift to treasure flips. A wooden ironing board, a metal tray, and a ceramic canister. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so you get notified when I upload a new video. Now let's get started. For the ironing board, I wanted to use milk paint because I wanted that base color to show through. So I am using Sweet Pickins Milk Paint in the color Flour Sack. And if you've never used milk paint before, it's really easy to use. It's simply just a mixture of 1-to-1 paint, milk paint to water. And milk paint comes in a powder form. So for the ironing board, I'm going to mix up a combination of 2 scoops of the milk paint and then 2 scoops of very warm water. You can use room temperature water too. I just like the results I get better with warm water. So I'm going to add my warm water right here, 2 scoops. And then I'm going to stir the milk paint up for about 2 minutes. And you want to make sure when you're stirring that you're kind of dissolving all the clumps and bumps of the milk paint. And so you're going to stir until you get a smooth consistency. So here I am stirring the milk paint up, and I will stir this for about 2 minutes. After your milk paint has been stirred for 2 minutes, then set it aside for about 10 minutes, and it's going to thicken up to like the consistency of a melted milkshake. So my paint is stirred and I'm setting it aside to let it thicken up. My milk paint has thickened up, and now I'm going to apply my first coat to the ironing board. When you put your first coat of milk paint on, it's going to look thin and streaky, but don't worry, that's totally normal. Usually by the second coat, you're going to notice excellent coverage. And sometimes on items with a darker base color, like this ironing board, you may need 3 coats, but most generally, 2 coats is all you need. So here you see me applying the milk paint, getting my first coat on the entire ironing board. My first coat of milk paint has dried, and here I'm applying the second coat. So you can see how much better the coverage is with the second coat of milk paint than the first coat. So I'm going to apply the second coat to the entire ironing board and then let it dry thoroughly. So my milk paint is dried, and now I'm going to apply my transfer. And for this transfer, I am using a Dixie Belle transfer called Tracy's Fancy. And so what I'm doing is I'm peeling off the paper backing to the transfer, and then I'm going to position and place the transfer exactly where I want it on the ironing board. And once I get it placed down, the back of the transfer has a tack to it, so it's going to adhere the transfer a little bit and kind of help keep it in place. And now I'm using my transfer tool to gently rub the transfer onto the ironing board so that way it sticks to the surface. And once I have that rubbed on, then I'm going to start gently lifting up the corner of the transfer, and then the transfer will be adhered to the surface. So you can see here that as I'm lifting up, the transfer is staying attached to the ironing board. So I will continue to do this for the whole transfer piece, and then the whole transfer will be attached to the ironing board. And then once I have this piece of transfer attached to my surface, then I'm going to take the transfer backing paper and my hands, and I'm going to rub over the transfer to burnish it in, or actually make it kind of become one with the paint. So here you'll see me taking the transfer paper and burnishing that transfer into the painted surface. And that's just making sure there's no bubbles or bumps or anything, and it's completely flat and adhered to the surface. So now I'm going to do the transfer for the end of the ironing board, and I'm just using my fingers here to kind of rub on the outline of where I want to cut my transfer, kind of marking my area. And then I'm going to take a scissors and cut a little bit bigger than the area that I marked out. So I have a little bit excess, make sure that I don't cut it too short. So I'm cutting around the transfer, cutting my piece out that's gonna fit the end of the ironing board. And then I'm gonna do the same thing that I did with the other piece, and I'm gonna remove the transfer backing, and then I'm gonna position and place my transfer where I want it on the ironing board. And so I'll rub it down to kind of gently stick it with my hands. And now again, I'm using the transfer tool to rub the transfer to attach it to the surface of the ironing board. And once I get that all rubbed down, then I'm going to gently lift up the corner of the transfer, pulling it back, and then you can see that the transfer underneath is stuck to the ironing board. And as I lift up the vellum backing for the transfer, it's clear. And so I'm coming to the end here and getting that all attached to the ironing board. And then I will take my hand again and then the paper backing from the transfer sheet, and I will rub it over the transfer to make sure that it gets completely adhered to the painted surface of the ironing board. Because this ironing board is a vintage ironing board, I didn't want the transfer to look so bright and brand new. So I'm taking a piece of 220 grit sandpaper here and gently sanding the transfer surface just to kind of make it look a little bit more worn and distressed and not so bright and new. I want it to match the chippy and crackly milk paint surface that I did underneath the transfer. So you can see here how it's a little bit more distressed looking and not as bright, and it matches the milk paint surface and looks more vintage and antique and distressed. So guys, anytime you use a transfer or milk paint, you need to seal it. And for my project, I'm choosing to seal it with Dixie Belle's Best Dang Wax in clear. And I'm going to use a wax brush, and then I'm going to dip it into the wax, get a good amount on my brush, and then apply it in a circular motion on the ironing board, getting every nook and cranny of the surface that has either paint or transfer on it. So here you'll see me applying the wax in a circular motion, and I'm going to do this on the whole entire ironing board surface and the sides. And even though the wax in the jar looks white, this is actually clear. So once I buff it out, when I'm done, it will show up as clear and not white. But when you're applying it, it kind of does show up with a little white tint to it, so you can see where you've applied the wax and where you haven't. So once I have the wax applied to the whole surface and sides of the ironing board top, then I'm going to take a soft cloth to buff the wax out. I let it sit for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to take my soft cloth and start buffing in kind of a circular motion on the surface. And you'll see that once you start buffing, the white tinge of the wax goes away and it shows up as a nice, clear, soft shine to the ironing board. And it's protecting the paint and the transfer underneath. Look how beautiful this turned out. I just love the chippy and the crackling of the milk paint and the distressed look of the transfer. I think it all goes together so beautifully, and it really makes this ironing board look vintage and antique like the rest of it is. I found this really cool metal tray at a garage sale, and my vision for this tray was to paint the center white and apply some decoupage paper, and on the beautiful detail around the edge, I want to try doing some white wax to pop all that beautiful detail. So I'm going to start with painting the center white, and for that I am going to use Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color Fluff. It just gives really good coverage with a couple of coats, covers up any imperfection, and it's the perfect base layer for decoupage paper. So I'm taking my Fluff paint and I'm painting just the inner circle, one good coat to start with. The first coat of chalk paint is done, and so here I'm going to add a second coat, and you can see the complete coverage just after the two coats. So it's giving a nice layer of the Fluff chalk paint for my second coat and getting ready to add my decoupage paper. I chose Peaceful Peonies decoupage paper by Dixie Belle for this project, and the decoupage medium that I'm going to be using is Extra Bond by Sweet Pickins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a small area of the Extra Bond to my tray, and then I'm going to flatten out the decoupage paper over that area only, smoothing out any wrinkles or any imperfections in the paper. I'm going to continue that process down the whole piece of decoupage paper, applying the Extra Bond, smoothing the paper out, and then applying the extra bond on top of the decoupage paper once everything is smoothed out. My decoupage paper has completely dried, and so now I'm going to take my little finger sander and just sand off the excess decoupage paper around the edge of the project. And you want to make sure that you let your decoupage paper completely dry before you do this, otherwise you're going to rip your paper. So I'm just taking 120 grit sandpaper on my finger sander and going around the edge of the project and sanding off the excess decoupage paper. So I have all the excess decoupage paper sanded off, and now I'm going to seal and protect the surface with Dixie Belle Clear Coat Gloss. And you always want to put some sort of top coat on your decoupage paper just to protect it and make sure that none of your paper rips. So I'm going to apply a healthy coat of the gloss to the decoupaged surface, and then I'm going to let it dry thoroughly and apply a second coat. I'm going to apply 2 coats to this piece just because the person who's going to have this piece is probably going to want to set things on it, and I want to make sure that the surface is durable and strong and that there's no chance of the decoupage paper ripping. There are so many beautiful details on this tray, and I wanted to highlight them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply Dixie Belle's Best Dang Wax in the color white all along the whole edge of the tray and the inside of the tray. So I'm going to use a wax brush and get a good amount of wax on my brush and then start applying it to the outer rim of the tray. And once I get the whole outer rim coated with the wax, I'm going to lightly coat the inside of the tray over the decoupage paper just with what's left over on my wax brush. After I got the wax applied to the whole tray, I set it aside for about 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, I grabbed a soft cloth and started buffing away the excess wax from the tray. And you can see here that it's leaving behind just the beautiful details that are really being showcased on this tray. And I'm loving how this is looking with the white wax. So I'm going to continue to buff away the excess white wax around the whole tray, and then you'll see what it looks like when it's all finished. I am loving how this tray is turning out with the wax. I love how it settles into all the details on the edge and the inside over the decoupage paper. It just gives it just a lovely vintage feel. What do you guys think? For this project, I took a ceramic canister and I'm going to apply some transfers from IOD's Painterly Floral Transfer Kit. So I have a bunch of scrap pieces and I'm going to use some up on this project here, some different flower pieces, roses and sunflowers, and I'm going to apply them all to this canister to decorate it up and make it look much nicer. So here I am with my first transfer. I'm laying it down, and with ceramic surfaces like this, the transfers go on super easy. So once you get it where you want it and lay it down, you have to commit. So here I am rubbing it into place, and then I'm going to take my transfer stick and rub it all over the transfer. And then once I get it rubbed all over and adhered to the project, then I'm going to start lifting up the edge of the transfer and peeling back the piece of vellum. And then you'll see here that the transfer is adhered to the project. So I'm going to continue to do this with my other transfer pieces from this set. And then at the end, you'll see all of them applied together. And after I apply the transfers, I am taking the back of the transfer piece and burnishing the transfers really good onto the project, just to make sure that they're adhered nicely and that there's no bubbles or bumps or any imperfections in the transfer. So you'll see after I get the vellum peeled up on the transfer, then I'm going to take that piece of vellum and burnish the transfer onto the crock. I decided that the project needed a couple more pieces of transfer, so I found some sunflower leaves and I'm adding those right now to the project. just to kind of give it a more finished look. So every time you're working with transfers, they do need to be sealed. And because this canister, the surface is already a glossy surface, I decided to seal this project with a gloss top coat. So I'm using Dixie Belle's clear coat in gloss to seal the entire project. So I'm going to take the gloss and I'm going to go over not only the transfer, but the whole canister completely, just to give it a nice cohesive glossy look and to seal in that transfer and protect the surface. So, what did you guys think? What was your favorite project? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button and setting the notification button to all so you get updated every time I upload a video. Thank you so much for watching.